Welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast. I am your host, Pastor Plek, recording live from Austin, Texas. And with me in the studio today is a creation expert. Well, or at least somebody who has looked it up once. Natalie Lipscomb, and I'm so glad to have you in studio with me. And the reason why you're here, Natalie, is we got a question that we wanted to address from the massive audience of Pastor Plek's podcast from around the globe. And this is the question. It said, old earth versus new earth creationism. Does it matter what Christians believe on this topic? First off, do you know the difference between old earth and new earth creationism?
Yeah, so this comes from the creation story. It says that day 1, God created this. Day 2, God created this. And there's 7 total days laid out in Genesis 1. So 7 days, we have 7 days today. So we think of that as 7 24-hour days is the kind of assumption that day means the same as day. But then if we look later...
Well, the Hebrew word is yom, if anyone's familiar with that word, like Yom Kippur, that means Day of Atonement. And so yom is a 24-hour period. So that's just usually what it refers to. Go ahead.
Okay, and then somewhere else, which if I had been more prepared, I could have looked up the reference where a day is like 1,000 years.
Right, that'd be like what
First
Peter, he wants no one to perish. But, you know, like, hey, everything's happening. But to the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. You know, when you're eternal, everything is forever. And that's what's sort of weird about it. But you have human beings who are finite within a timeline, and it's just different for God who, you know, with time, with God, it's, time becomes three-dimensional. So, like, you know, the 2D is like time on a, you know, going left to right. But with God, God goes into the time. It's like, and he can go straight through it to be an infinite, you know, on a X, Y, then the Z chord, it goes straight into your timeline, if that makes sense.
It's getting a lot of physics or...
You know, math. Okay,
algebra.
Anyway, sorry. That was, okay. Anyway, go back to what you were saying. So the young earth theory is like a day is a 24-hour period. The yom means yom, and so it's 24 hours, and so why would we not think about that? And that would put the earth and the universe were created relatively recently within a time frame of approximately the last 6,000 to 10,000 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So what about old earth? Talk to me about that, of what you know about that.
Old earth is a perspective that is not a 24-hour period. I think that encompasses everything of the old earth, but that it was over a very gradual period of time, and there's a lot of people that believe that fits better with what we know of science.
Right. So like when you look at the scientific consensus of geology, astronomy, biology, it suggests that the Earth and the universe are billions of years old. And this viewpoint is based on various lines of evidence, such as radiometric dating of rocks, fossil records, cosmic background radiation, and the expanding universe. Okay. Which then that gets to the Big Bang Theory, which if you put it in reverse, it would take you back 4.5 billion years. And so the age of Earth would be 4.5 billion. The age of the universe would be around 13.8 billion-ish. I don't know, something like that. So is this problematic to believe one or the other? And I think, how would you, just as a person who is like lay Christian speech therapist that works at RRISD, how would you feel about, does this affect your life as a Christian, or could it affect your life as a Christian?
I think that's a better way, is it could.
Yeah.
You can take it very open-handed of God has the power to do this, God has the power to do this, God has the creativity to do this. If you put it in the perspective of God is powerful enough to do either one, and that he invented science and he can do whatever he wants and it's consistent and perfect, then really I could take one stance, get to heaven, find out I was wrong, and it really doesn't affect anything.
Right, so here's where it does matter. Or like if people, they can get so wound up in one sort of, I don't know, like way.
Yeah.
All right, so the young earth way, you would say, okay, well, we know we have evidence of, let's say you're going young earth, or you're critiquing the young earth.
Okay.
you'd say, we know we have evidence of dinosaurs. Like nobody's sitting there going, like, dinosaurs didn't exist. You know, those are just made up by NASA to...
I mean, some people.
Yeah, all right. So,
let's not encompass everyone.
Yeah, all right. So most people will kind of I'll give you dinosaurs.
Sure.
And then the problem, so then you got these dinosaurs when they kind of, you create a timeline and that puts it way back. If these dinosaurs existed, blah, 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 blah. Or like there is it seems to be like a prehistoric or a pre-Adamic man. Like Neanderthals don't seem to be the same thing as Homo sapiens. Like what do you do with that? And I think that's where the people that are like, science people would say like, okay, here's the evidence. Okay, young earth people, go. And the response, and the reason why this could be a problem is if you say that God, the first man and woman is Adam and Eve, and the historical record shows that's only 6,000 to 10,000 years old, and then you find a civilization that's older than Adam, then you're like, well, then that makes the Bible not true. Okay, so then you go, well, then we're stuck. But and then I'm going to give a defense, and then I'll also flip it. I'll give a defense for the young earth thing, and then I don't pretend to be an expert on this at all, but I'm going to give you a pastor's perspective on this. So you could say, well, God created the world with age. And there actually weren't dinosaurs roaming around. There's just something that looked like dinosaurs. Or they're actually dinosaurs that they made skeletons and God did what he wanted. And in one day, he kind of created the whole thing to make it happen. Okay, like, done. And so the Earth started with dinosaurs that are fossils. Okay, that's an option. Or that their lifespan went like super speed and it lasted 24 hours. Like, there's some bugs that live and die in a day and that's their whole lifespan. You can kind of go that route.
Okay.
Now, Neanderthals, a different sort of like, there seems to be this different type of humanoid being that is out there. What does that mean? You go, okay, well, either that we just got a fossil record that's off because they just happen to have different types of skulls, and there was, the one skull that we found was like, maybe a deformed person. It kind of gave this impression that everybody looked like that, and or maybe there's a couple of them that you found. It could go a million different ways like that. So I think there's a way to argue it, to go that route. But here's so. Whether you're a new or old, that would be the way you could defend young Earth, creationism. But you could also defend young or old Earth, like because I feel like people say if it's old Earth, well then if there's humans before Adam, then what do you do with that? Okay, so first off, here's my thought on for some Christians who just feel like old Earth is of the devil. Let me kind of help you out here. Let's talk about what the first day was, okay, right? In Genesis 1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness night. All right. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Now, hold on. We have light and we have dark. And you'd think, oh, well, that makes sense. The sun, from their perspective, the sun rose and then...
Well, not the sun.
Well, hold on.
Okay.
But you would think that that's kind of like the sun would rise and that's the light and then there's dark.
Okay.
But you don't have a sun.
Yeah.
There is no sun here.
Oh, sorry. Jumped the gun there.
Yeah, you did. You really stole my punch right there. That was, I probably should have briefed you ahead of time. All right. So then you've got let's go down to where we've got a sun. So, okay, so you got the first day without a sun and a moon. And do you even have a rotating earth at this point? I don't know. And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven, so sky. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. Okay, so we've got 2 days, no sun yet. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place and then let dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, the waters that were gathered together he called seas, and God saw it was good. All right, and then God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruits bearing fruit, in which there's seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants seed according to their own kind, and trees bearing fruit in their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw it was good, and there was evening and morning, and that was the third day. 3 days, still no sun. Okay. And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so, and God made the two great lights, a greater light to rule the day, and a lesser light to rule the night and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. God saw it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning the fourth day. So the sun and moon come on the fourth day. And so you've got 3 days without a traditional like rotating 24-hour period around the planet. So whether that the yom in this case is a 24-hour period, or whether it's explaining that what God did in that day, this is where you could go, a yom typically means a 24-hour period. Okay, fine. And maybe God did all that in a 24-hour period because, for God, time is nothing. This is where I know I keep going down this road, but if God is God in a timeline, he can go into a certain point in time infinitely deep. And so you can create 1 billion years on a Z-axis when you've been dealing on X and Y. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
And I know this is the part where it just is so nerdy and who cares? Okay, all right, but so then if you keep going, you got birds and animals and blah, 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 blah. And then you get all the way down to verse 26, and then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image, and in the image of God, he created him, in male and female, he created them. All right, so you've got male and female, to which this is where you're like, oh, okay, cool. So he creates men and women. And then when you get to chapter 2, most people go, well, chapter 1 and chapter 2 are two different accounts. This is where it's like chapter 1 is like one account story, and then later on someone else had a later edited version, like, oh, here's chapter 2 when we kind of went with the God created Adam, then he created Eve version. Whereas, what if it was a hinge, like chapter 1, then chapter 2? It's like, here's this first part of the story, then here's the second part of the story, and then that kind of lays the groundwork for a pre-Adamic man, which then everyone gets a little nervous. And so you have this pre-Adamic man, maybe it was a Neanderthal, and I can kind of go down this road for a while. But again, like this is where I don't have a dog in this fight, I guess you could say. Like, I don't have a dog in the fight to kind of determine which one, but I'm just going to kind of give you the perspective of like the old earth and how it could fit with a Christian worldview. Because I think what usually happens, people will like lose their mind on the old earth sort of reality because it's going to get to this point of, if there's pre-Adamic man, then what the heck? How in the world can we? So watch. So chapter 2, you get to the point where God forms the man, okay, right? He from the earth with his, let's go down to verse 5. When no bush of the field was in the land, and yet no small plant of the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain on the land. There was no man to work the ground, and the mist was going up from the land. So this is where they'd say, like, ha, you see, there's nothing in this ground. And a mist was going up from the land and was watering the whole face of the ground. Then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and made and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Now the breath of life becomes super important because he's the only one of all creation that God breathes into. And this is where I would say is where in the age of innocence, you have this self-awareness. That is, you're aware of yourself in relation to other things. And I think that's probably what the breath of life is that there's this awareness of me, and then there's God, and there's other things, and he's going to interact with them as one who is responsible for all the other creation. Because it's going to say, like, listen, he formed the man of dust in the ground, and then the Lord God planted a garden Eden in the east, and there he put the man. So he forms him in one spot and then places him inside the garden. Okay. And then he's there to take care of the garden, and he's take care of all, animals, and everything is there with him. He's going to name all the animals. He has a job of naming animals and taking care of the garden. That's all part of his job. Everyone so far, we're great. This could be the first man, Or it could be a man later developed, and from, there's a new form of man because it's created from the earth. It's not there was or it could be, who knows? This might be just all figurative language about, God. Does God have hands? Does God have feet? No, God is God. He's spirit. And so God forms this man who's a unique person and breathes into him the breath of life while there's other people around. And he's a special man. He's put in a special garden. We'll call it Eden because that's what he calls it. Eden, he's there to tend to, he names the animals. There we go. Okay. Well, then he's given a woman because he couldn't find anyone that matched him. To which this is where people go, well, clearly there was no one that could match him because there was no other person. To which I say, okay, maybe. We get to Genesis 3, Genesis 2, the woman is made, the man is called Ish, the woman is called Isha because she was taken out of man. There you go, general thing, and the two became one flesh. What a beautiful story. And then we get to Genesis 3 where the serpent comes in, destroys the whole thing, wrecks the woman, tempts her, and she sees that the fruit looks pleasing to the eye, looks like it's going to be able to make you wise. She wants to become God. She wants to listen to Satan and not God, and that's where her allegiance then shifts. And then all of a sudden, she becomes wise in her own eyes, and everything falls apart. Now, we got that. That's Genesis 3. In Genesis 4, we get to Cain and Abel. Okay, Cain and Abel. Long story short, Abel's a good kid. Cain not so good. And Abel's sacrifice of the firstborn of his flock is accepted. Cain's sacrifice of some of his fruit of the harvest, not accepted. Cain is jealous, or Cain is envious of Abel and kills him. Okay, we all got that so far. Cain leaves, and then we find out he goes, I think it's Genesis 5. He heads off to the land of, the second half of Genesis 4. Cain heads off to the land of Nod. Nod means land of wandering. And there he somehow finds a wife. Back at the ranch with Adam and Eve, she's now lost 2 kids. And she doesn't say man, I sure wish we should have kept those other kids around that we populated the earth with. Mm-hmm. She's really upset. Now they have nobody, and they pray to God or talk to God, and God blesses them with Seth. So you went Cain and Abel. Cain leaves. Abel's dead. Now, if there were other children, because usually what the young earth people go with is there were other kids that they had, and, Cain took one of and since they were purebred, it wasn't a big deal for them to have inbreeding. So no big deal. But that makes 0 sense. If you only have 2 kids, one of them dies, one of them wanders off, you would probably talk about the birth of one of the other ones. All these women folk, send them off. No, that's the young earth's answer to that. And I just think that's weird. But when Cain goes to Nod, there's women there. Because he marries wives. Or he gets a wife there. And then they have kids. And then Lamech comes around. And now I'll give you that. He's worried about someone coming around and killing him. It's a human being, a humanoid, a human type person. It's a someone that he's worried about killing him, not a wild animal, not some beast. He's worried about someone might kill him. And so that's where I'd say.
And the Lord specifically says, I'm going to protect you.
I'm going to mark you with something. Well, with what? Now, that could be and this is where I say, okay, that was just a figure of expression of he's going to make all animals afraid of humans, maybe. But I just think it was the Lord's blessing on him that he was a son of God who got exiled off the island, so to speak, and then he intermingles with Neanderthals or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem with this is when you get to Romans, and this is the part now. And now I know I'm off the reservation a little bit here, but hang with me. So Romans 4, I believe it is. Let me see if I can find it. So Romans 4, or maybe it's being when Adam sinned. So it might be Romans 5. When Adam sinned, therefore, just as one trespass led to condemnation for all men. So Adam's sin, Therefore, as one trespass led to condemnation for all men, so one act of righteousness leads to justification and life for all men. For as by the one man's disobedience, the many were made sinners, so by the one man's obedience, the many were made righteous. Okay, so, well, then that's where it goes. Well, you're a natural born sinner because sin passes through the bloodline, to which, and this is where I'm going to make a definition which sounds weird, and so forgive me for being overly theological, but it's called a federal head. A federal head is representative of all people of all time, and so Adam is the federal head of the world, and so his sin then makes everybody a sinner. Now, to which then you say, like, well, then somebody could have died outside the will of God and never actually sinned. Well, no, they're still broken sin, or maybe there's some. The reality, though, is that Noah and his family are the only ones to survive the flood, and they're from the line of Adam. So then that still comes through all have sinned that live today because they come through Adam to Noah, and that solves that. So anyway, so is it possible to be a Christian and an old earth person? Yes, you do have to do a little bit of, I don't know, maybe it's just biblical exegesis, cultural exegesis, anthropology, and what's it called when you study what the earth is? Geology. Yeah, I guess anthropology of the first earliest humans that we can find. And it still fits. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. It's still, I don't think it matters. So if you want to go young earth and say it was Adam and Eve and the land of Nod was somehow the daughters of Adam and Eve or something that they had way before Cain and Abel, because we've had all these girls, so let's just send them off. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess it seems weird to me that would be the thing. But this is where I can be agnostic on the subject of this, and I don't feel like it bothers me, and I'm not sitting here struggling with it. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Does that help? When I go through all that, is there anything that sparks up for you as an interesting little thoughtoid?
There's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there, and there's people that dedicate their lives to this type thing.
I would call myself a lay pastor person on old earth, young earth stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I think the conversations that I've had around this aren't really about this topic.
What is it really about?
I've had friends that say, well, I'm a Christian, but I've learned too much about science for certain things to make sense. And then that we're letting our discoveries and our finite knowledge change our theology.
Sure.
And that is where it gets really, really sticky.
Yeah. Because this is the part, right? And I know this sounds weird. If you are a Christian, you didn't make yourself a Christian by thinking. Obviously your brain is a part of it, but God revealed himself to you and saved you. Mm-hmm. It is a gift. So, and the reason why it's important is there's no amount of I'm going to study really hard and I'm going to get myself to believe, because you can't do that. Even if you have presented all the perfect facts, you still can't make yourself believe. It's a gift of God, so that no one can boast. Because the very second we said, I did the study, I had the effort, I put it in, then your salvation is no longer dependent on God's grace, it's depending on you.
There's no PhD in Christianity.
Right. Well, I guess you could get a PhD in it, but anyway, but I guess that's where I'm going with that.
Yeah. Your credits don't transfer.
Yeah, your credits don't transfer. So talk to me then, what do you... So usually, people kind of come to you and they say, listen, I was a Christian, or I grew up Christian. Mm-hmm. And then once I went to college and I had all these people telling me that that's dumb and here's why. Clearly there could be no God because of all this stuff. And you say...
Well, the people I've talked to specifically, it hasn't shaken their faith in the existence of God as a whole. Right. I'm sure that's true for some people. Our idea of science and what we have discovered about science, been taught about science, it fits into someone's narrative, right? So it takes faith to believe something because no one was there.
Right.
So it takes faith, and no one's going to try to contradict themselves.
Right.
What we learn about science is going to fit in with something, and it's probably not going to fit in with the creation story.
Right.
Where people that are honestly after truth are people like Lee Strobel, who has a really awesome story. For those of you that don't know Lee Strobel, he was an investigative journalist, atheist.
In Chicago,
whose wife became a Christian, and he took all the measures he could to prove it wrong, and became an awesome apologist for the creation and the existence and power of Christ. So he's a Christian now because...
And a pastor.
Yeah. Awesome things to say. And yeah, just his journey of being
You can watch the movie
staunchly.
Case for Christ. I think it's still on Netflix, and there's the book, obviously, goes for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like what can happen with people is that they can get so wrapped up in a intellectual debate, they don't engage the spiritual, because at some point you have to go, all right, did ex nihilo, like that's, did something out of nothing, like out of nothing, did something come out of nothing? And if so, where did that something come from? And now, to be fair, this is where if you're an atheist out there, I will give you your argument so that we don't feel like this is a biased deal. But your argument would be like, well, if there was God, did he come out of nothing? And so if so, where did God come from? So no matter what, we're both starting with a premise that something came out of nothing. I'm just saying a piece of matter came out of nothing, and you're saying a God came out of nothing. And I would say, no, my God always existed. And they say, aha, my piece of matter always existed. And then we're like stuck at a truce, right? So I feel like that's the part of faith that we're both taking a leap of faith. The atheist takes the leap of faith that there is nothing out there. The Christian or theist is taking the leap of faith that God started it all and always has been. And so we both come back to the first cause. And the first cause for a atheist is nothing. First cause for us is God was. God is. Nothing is. And they both sort of merge at some point. And as we evolved, atheist would say, we grew a conscience and we were able to think through for our own survival. It's just weird to me. Like, if it's not like animals are evolving to a point where they're like self-aware, and someone say, no, gorillas are aware, dolphins are aware. I'm like, maybe.
Yeah.
But you're not watching them build their own civilization and like taking charge of other animals. Like that's the one thing that dolphins and gorillas and monkeys are not doing. They're not trying to kind of like domesticate other animals. Like, how is that happening? Because I think there's this real thing of subduing and life. And you're like, especially if you're a natural, what is this in you that wants to preserve the life of the people and the planet and the animals and all that? Anyway, that's the part where I go. And I'm like, there isn't an animal equivalent. Unless you're saying we used to be that, and so the animal equivalent is that's where we used to be. We used to be a fish, and then we became a land animal.
And we're the in-betweener animals. They should be everywhere.
Right. Yeah. So
I think it takes a ton more faith to believe evolution from a logic standpoint. Like, trying to take my faith out of it is really hard and look at it objectively, but to look at any area of study of science, to look at astronomy, to look at physics, to look at anatomy, anything, and say that is random and without design. And
which is why the search for the missing link, you may have heard that. That's what everybody's searching for. Where is the half man, half gorilla person that kind of puts it all together for us? And you just don't have that. You do. I do think you have like Neanderthals, that I think you have groups of people who genetically are different, but
by like genetic mutation from a human?
No, but like God designed them differently. Right? And so like, it wasn't like they were once, this is what became a human. This is like an entire different species, just like you've got a chimpanzee and a gorilla. Like it could have been like they're in the same family of, I guess, ape family. Is that what that'd be? And you have the same family of like the Homo sapien, whatever the Neanderthal official term is.
I don't know.
You could go down that road. But what we know is that through the flood, only the Homo sapiens of Noah survived, and that's why we have all that we have is the humans that we know today. So there you go. It could go a whole bunch of different roads with that, but I think what ends up happening, you're all in just what you were saying, is all you have, you don't have proof, you have evidence.
Yeah, and the flood is a big part of that theology as well, of looking at how we age things. It's carbon dating. So either over time, things were gradual and they followed a pattern, or there was a gigantic, heavy thing like water that happened that compressed everything.
Right.
There's a ton of canopy theory things that I could nerd out about.
Yeah, I think that's it. So I do feel like you don't necessarily need to kind of go to the 4.5 billion years old for Earth and 13.8 billion for the universe. I don't think you need to go there. But and here's the weird thing. I think God can make both true at the same time.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because remember, time is weird for God. It's 3-dimensional, and for us, it's 2. And I think that's where we're finite. And when you look at how God operates, he can, in a moment, he can make anything happen. Like if you can heal somebody, if you can make a dead man rise, if you can start the earth from nothing, even whether it's the Big Bang or God just was like playing with Play-Doh or like a big water thing, he's like, I'm going to make out of this watery thing, I'm going to make expanse of land and sky come out of it. Because when I think of the water, the chaos, and God brings order to it, which is kind of like how God brings order to our own chaos of sin. Anyway, and all major religions sort of talk about this good, evil complex, which usually is represented by chaos and order. Right. Anyway, I don't want to go Jordan Peterson on everybody, but I do think there's this part of which, as we understand the depth of history, geology, anthropology, all of that, it just points to an order that was created out of nothing. And why does that order arise over time? Something has to be behind it, because if it's completely random, gosh, that seems like such a miracle of the randomness that could produce this planet with this amount of sophistication, where I'm looking at electronic screens everywhere, and the finite, tiny tools of like what's in this computer is so small and like thin and amazing that has to come from monkeys aren't designing stuff. But anyway, now I'm off on another tangent. Any other thoughts on that kind of the thought process for old Earth, young Earth?
Wow, I have so many thoughts on it. So
give me another one. Like we got some time. This is what I'm here to talk about.
Organized thoughts. We'll see. That's what Nicole claimed, is that I had organized thoughts on this topic. But thankfully,
go throw it. Thankfully, I'm that unorganized.
The past 2 days, I have been studying this with one of my high schoolers. So very wonderful. Timely that
go for it.
Fresh looked at this.
What's the one of the things you've been talking about with one of your high schoolers?
We talked about, does it rattle your faith or does it strengthen your faith? Or I guess not do anything. If we don't understand everything about God. It can shake your faith if you're like, I want everything to be completely logical and all make sense. Or I look at it as it strengthens my faith that I cannot be at the same intellectual level as God. Like there's something so much higher and so much greater, but he reveals so much to us. Like science points absolutely to a creator to me, but I can't understand every single thing. One, not the smartest human, but even the smartest human can't understand every little detail. But how good is God that he doesn't put that on our shoulders to understand everything. He's so good and he knows so much better. Right, because I think if you were to understand God, and you have to have a PhD in biology, boy, that'd be a limited number of Christians. Or if you had to have access to the information of like history and because it's only now that we have so much information that we're bombarded with. I think, and it's really kind of a beautiful thing in many ways, but it can be very information overload, and you're not sure what is true and what's not, and what are people biased to kind of make you believe because they want their own agenda to go forward. It's really challenging. And it's dualistic in the way that you can't fit new incoming information to fit the narrative that you already have. And that is on a Christian perspective and a secular perspective. You can't make everything fit the Big Bang Theory just because you want it to. And you can't make everything fit creation the way that you understand it just because you want it to. It has to be something that you hold open-handed, because truth is truth and it doesn't need your approval. Doesn't need your help. And I think this kind of, on God's sovereignty and human responsibility, which one is it? And it's both. And so there's a lot of things that I think that seem in tension, but it can actually be both at the same time. So anyway, what else? I would love to kind of, so creation, like that sort of cannot rock your faith. What else? What else for what? Like what else do you talk about with your high school students or just people in general that you've been walking this through? Well, we got to Genesis 3 today, so I wasn't expecting you actually to go past creation into people, but I was like, yeah, people really have.
I mean, the
a lot to do with
anthropology is
that.
probably the biggest thing for me that I feel like is the thing that's a hang up for people, because they go like, well, if there was people before Adam, then Adam's sin couldn't have just affected everybody. I'm like, yeah, it can, because it's not like Jesus, like there is a reality that we are born again, but the salvation for Jesus went lateral, not horizontal. Speaking like of like family tree-ish things, like so like it. So I think it fits as a federal head of like just he represents all humans and they're all sinners now.
Yeah,
which is wild because he was given perfection to live in, and and it could have been that. And again, this is where we get into the mind of God, and I don't even want to pretend to go here, but here's if you're an atheist here, like it could go like this: God creates all these human beings, they're just living their lives, doing their own thing, good, evil, not really sure, but I want one to have a relationship with me so I can understand, as if God needed to understand, but so he could reveal to human beings, just kind of even in the most perfect environment where you're the only person and there's no other people there, that you can still be tempted by something if you're just giving, don't press the red button. And they press the red button.
Yeah.
So which means every person, there isn't a design flaw. It's just like your curiosity and your temptation left to your own devices, you're going to do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And so completely separated and isolated from the rest of humanity, where there was no jealousy, where they're, able to make one wise. Wise against who, right? Like what are you worried about? It's just you, right? It's not like they were given an anthropology class, and maybe they were, I don't know. But it's not like you're given an anthropology class. There's all these other Neanderthals that live over here. But if you want to be you're already better than them because you walk with God in the cool of the day. But if you want to be way better than them, then just eat this fruit and you'll be really wise. No, it was a comparison between them and God. Like, I want to be equal to God because there's someone superior to me in the, social hierarchy. It's God and man. And I don't like that. I want to be equal to. I want to be my own God. And that's the big problem that everybody wrestles with, which is why we're all sinners. We all want to be our own God, having treason against the one who is good. So I think, this is where this is like the mental gymnastics I could probably do backflips on all day, is that that's what happened with Adam and Eve in the garden. You don't need a perfected garden to sort of realize that the brokenness of your own soul, because even the perfect people struggled. And so if perfect people cannot overcome sin, then how could sinners overcome sin? You can't. And that's why our need of a Savior. And I always go back to this. And when it comes to creation, I think the place I go to, I get that Genesis is challenging, but it's poetry. It wasn't meant to be a science textbook. It was meant to be a poetic expression of how all of the universe was created. And it's true. There's no untruth in it. It just may not be true mathematically the way you're looking at it, in the same way that a poet or a song lyricist says stuff that's sort of an exaggeration or whatever, but it still makes the song completely true to the author's intent. To then we go to, I went blank on where I was going with that. Where was I going?
I don't know.
I had a genius thought that I was about to share with you that you were about to be mind blown by.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Well.
This is where I should have taken notes on where I was going. Anyway, okay. I think that's where we struggle with creation, kind of going to, we want to be able to prove it in evidence. I had something really way better than that. Oh well. Okay. So going back to you and just the conversations that you're having over creation, over Genesis, getting to Genesis 3 in the fall, where does that take you with people that you're wrestling with now?
Well, talking to Christians, I think taking a step back and being like, okay, doubts are really scary. And a lot of people have, I think, a lot of misinformation or ideas about what it means to doubt. And they're really scared of that. And there's a lot of religions that don't allow for you to doubt. It's a sin to doubt. And that is not part of our faith at all. No. And I compare it to like an underclassman. I'm like, how many questions do you have about Calculus 5? And they're like, nothing. I'm like, well, if you were in Calculus 5, do you think you'd have a lot more questions if you've taken 1 through 4? And they're like, yeah, I'd probably have a lot more questions. It's like, yeah, you understand it better. You don't have any questions because you haven't delved into it. So the doubts and questions that you have means that you're diving into it and you're wrestling with it.
Yeah, that's good. Man, this is when people doubt their own salvation because they're wrestling with this. I go, you wouldn't doubt your salvation if you weren't saved. And here's what I mean by that. like a person who is lost doesn't worry about their salvation in regards to God. They're just, they don't, I can do what I want to do. There is no God, whatever. But if you believe there is a God and you're sort of wrestling with it, then that means you're concerned, which might give evidence to your actual salvation. But it comes back to you cannot be saved by your own intellectual merits or your own good deeds. You have to be saved by grace alone through faith alone. So there you go. Hey, listen, if you got questions and you would love to sort of kind of help, I would love to wrestle them through. We even bring Natalie back if you got some more creation questions for her, because she's wrestling with this on the daily basis with students. We'd love to kind of help her navigate some of that while feeding the fodder of questions. But yeah, we love those questions. You can text at 737-231-0605, or you can go to pastorplek.com, leave a message for us there. We would love to hear from you. And any other things before we wrap up?
I think we covered it all. We answered the question perfectly.
I had this one genius thought that just is now in Neverland, and that's
maybe
really
it
sad.
was coming from a place of pride. The Lord said
Ooh,
no.
Nice. And the Lord erased it. All right,
I'm sure it was great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, hey, listen, thanks for listening, and we'd love to talk about this kind of stuff more with you guys. From our house to yours, have an awesome week.